I'm very happy to have Luke Beasley joining us right now on the show. Luke, it's good to have you on the show, my friend, for the first time. How are you?
Brian, it's great to be with you. I'm doing, well considering.
Yeah, we're all hanging in there, right, Luke? I really appreciate what you do, and thanks for coming on. So let's start off with a phone call that I received a few weeks ago that included you in that phone call, and David Pacman talked about it on his show. I had a guy call into the show that literally blamed you and David Pacman and Harry Sisson for the reason why Kamala Harris lost. Obviously, it's ridiculous, and I defended you guys. But what do you make of a MAGA supporter that makes a ridiculous claim like that, Luke?
Well, it was interesting. I did see David Pacman's coverage of it, which is what sort of cued me to that moment. And you did a great job of quickly demonstrating that a lot of times a critique, like I think his critique was that we're smug, which is interesting because I get that sometimes when you're confidently speaking about a political issue, it could come off to people who disagree with you as smug. But I make extra efforts, you even referenced the interviews, to at least portray respect whenever I'm disagreeing with people. And so I was confused by that. But you then turned it around and said it's smug, but do they belittle? And that's something that you think is bad? Well, what about the person that you support? So the contradiction there is rather confusing. But, I've heard that before. And I think if you're even from within the movement, if you're turning your sights on people who are every day encouraging people to tune in, to care about these things, to make sure they vote, get their friends to vote, and try to explain the importance of these issues. If you're saying those are the people who are harming when we have a crisis of motivation, really, I think that's what the last election came down to, is not enough people being motivated to go stand up for what was right, then I think you're focused on the wrong problem.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you 100% on that, Luke. I thought it was a ridiculous claim that this guy made. And by the way, you're very respectful. You just come at people with facts. You're a nicer man than I. Sometimes it's hard for me to. I'm a little bit more aggressive, and that's credit to you, Luke. When you talk to MAGA supporters for years now across the country, and you do such a great job. What is your biggest frustration with everyday Trump supporters that you speak to on a regular basis?
Ooh, that is a difficult question. Well, one thing that is uniquely upsetting to me is when I used to go to rallies frequently, other supporters go, I don't know why this would be a pastime for you, but they'll go from one to another to hear Trump's same stories over and over again. And so if I would interview someone and then the clip would go viral, sometimes they would have seen it and then go to a future rally and be upset with me. And so I'd be inclined to start going off on, hypocrisy or a lack of information when it seems like they haven't actually thought about an issue, but they proclaim something. But probably the time I was the most upset was walking away from a confrontation I had with a guy who came up and was really mad at me for he got recognized from the clip because it had, made the rounds, and someone was just probably calling him names. And I apologize that happened to him, but he was trying to blame me for taking out of context or doing some editing. And so I pulled up the clip with him and I said, what did I miss here? What did I cut? How did I distort your meaning? Ultimately, he concluded, okay, you didn't really, but I just didn't like that so many people saw it. And so a lot of people, I think, have never really heard themselves articulate their position. And when they do, they want to blame someone because it sounds crazy, but it's just their view being played back to them. And that was the most upsetting engagement, where he was so mad at me for daring to, as we got his permission to, record our conversation. And I think it was really just a looking yourself in the mirror type moment for him.
Yeah, well, I don't feel bad for him at all. You're a nicer man than I wouldn't have apologized to him, because if you say idiotic things and you get owned with facts, then you deserve it, in my opinion. I'm not condoning any violence or harassment, but at the same time, if you're going to look like a fool, you're probably a fool. So Luke,
Brian,
sorry, I can't help it, Luke. I can't help it. I'm still fired up after doing Pierce Morgan the other day and having to debate Michael Knowles, who's another imbecile. Ooh. But yeah. Have you done, by the way, Pierce before?
Yeah. Actually, just today I was supposed to be on, but they canceled. They're very all over the place.
Yeah, they canceled on me once too, Luke. I just can't be nice to a guy like a Michael Knowles or a Matt Schlapp. I'm sorry, my opinion. My nickname for him is Matt Schlong, but we'll talk about that for another day, Luke.
No comment.
Fair enough. But let's talk a little bit, Luke, about the last 7 weeks of the Trump administration, because you're so good and articulate. And I say to myself, in the last 7 weeks, he's blamed DEI hires, right, for plane crashes. The war in the Ukraine, probably worse off now than it was 7 weeks ago. As you know, he's stopped intelligence to Ukraine and aid to Ukraine. The Israel-Palestinian conflict is no better than it was 7 weeks ago. And then you see all these tariffs that are negatively affecting our economy. What are your thoughts on the first 7 weeks, and how could anybody make the case that this has been successful so far?
I can't answer that question, but I can answer the first. It's been disastrous, and I think both of us were sounding the alarm in the lead up to the election. And so it's not surprising in the sense that I couldn't have imagined him doing bad things, but even I think I was a little naive to how fast it would move and how much of the stuff that he used to sort of rant about and a lot of the mainstream media would downplay as he's just sort of venting or saying something random actually ended up being a priority for him. And then I'm genuinely, I can understand not the morality, but the thought process when I square his views with the ideology that he has. So you say, okay, his ideological alignment and the MAGA movement with Putin is disturbing, and it leads to what we saw in the Oval Office and what we've seen with the cutting off of aid, cutting off of intelligence to Ukraine. And with the tariff stuff, I genuinely don't know what the end game is there. What is he doing in a campaign that was so built on, even though it bothered me that it got simplified down to this, because I think it helped his message when he was saying a lot of dangerous stuff. But the media very much simplified his campaign to immigration and affordability. And just, I think it was yesterday, he posted a link to an article that was titled "Shut Up About Egg Prices." And so as he built a whole campaign on convincing people wrongly that he'd be better for this issue than Biden or than Harris, he's now explicitly telling people, shut up. I don't care about one of the reasons many people did choose to vote for him. So how those people, Brian, go on to defend him, I have no idea. But to answer your question succinctly, more disastrous than even I expected.
Agree. I'm watching your interview, and I thought you did such a great job with Tim Pool, who's one of the, let's be honest, he's one of the most popular right-wing podcasters around. And you're sitting there, and I'm wondering what's going through your mind, because you did such a good job, and you bring up facts, and then he doesn't know what he's talking about, and then he brings it up on his laptop and shows it on, and you end up being right. But yet he doesn't say, geez, you know what, Luke, you're right, and I'm wrong. Like, he can't even bring himself to do that. And it was like 2-on-1 or even 3-on-1. And I thought you destroyed them. You were very calm. You destroyed them with facts. What's going through your mind, I'm wondering, when you're doing an interview like that?
I want a cheeseburger. In that moment, I was really hungry, to be honest. But what happened there was that little clip that got, well, first of all, thank you for saying that. You're very kind. But one of the reasons I apologize to the aforementioned Trump supporter is because regardless of how absurd he was being, I do know how it feels to feel like just more people than you've ever seen in one place hating on you. And in that situation, it was so confusing to me. And it's one of the reasons I've pulled back on doing as many debates, because you realize that the viewers of these shows aren't coming at this in an open-minded way at all. And so when I would go and see these huge channels covering, or Twitter accounts posting that clip you're talking about where he screams and screams and screams, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna let him get whatever this is out. I think he's clip farming, but I'll wait and then just explain to him why he's wrong. And even in accounts that would clip the entire thing, they wouldn't even cut out of context. And at the end, Tim Pool proves to the show that I was correct about it. You have everyone in the comments being like, wow, in the, of course, right-wing accounts, and that's the opposite on the left-wing accounts, but wow, Luke got destroyed, Tim Pool wrecked him, just because his tone of voice was exacerbated. Right. And it's so disheartening to know most people probably didn't even watch the full clip. They just saw the beginning and he was shouting and they saw the caption. And that's enough for them to believe, yes, Tim Pool must have been telling the truth, even if it's false. So it did once again demonstrate to me something that sometimes for sport, it's fun. You go on peers, you make some points. Hopefully someone out there's listening open-mindedly and could shift their point of view. But the effort like that one, you have to, for Tim Pool, drive out to West Virginia, and there's this whole process. It is disheartening to learn that the viewers aren't really listening to hear an exchange of ideas, but are just going to characterize everything in their paradigm regardless of what actually takes place. So that was unfortunate. And then one other strong part of that memory was a lot of people I debate, and I am infuriated by their views, but I'm not doubting that they're being genuine. With Tim, it was like a switch went off. He was talking totally normally, and then he sat up in his chair and started shouting like he knew it was just going to be a social media clip. And that, again, as someone who's always coming at these things, really wanting to believe everyone's acting in good faith, was another discouraging part of that experience. So I don't think I'll be doing that again. But again, the peers stuff is less effort, and it can be fun.
So what you experienced is very similar to what I experienced on Pierce the other day, where Michael Knowles is making the claim that George Floyd died of a fentanyl overdose. And what I explained to him is that there were 2 autopsies, and both of those autopsies labeled it a homicide. Did not die from a fentanyl overdose while there was fentanyl in his system. And I repeated that to Michael over and over again. And then I look at the comments and oh, well, Michael Knowles destroyed you. Why? Because he lied? Like I don't even know how to react. I guess the best thing to do is not to react to it, right? But Luke, in a way, I went through the same thing you went through in the comments. But chances are, if you're a Pierce Morgan fan, I guess you're probably a Tucker Carlson fan. You're probably a Michael Knowles fan. And if you go on Tim Pool's show, even on a bigger scale, at least in this country, you're a MAGA supporter no matter what, right? So there's no reason to even argue with them, right? Or debate or whatever you call it.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, the way that I've really found success in moving the needle with people is on an interpersonal, no cameras, long-term, slow, patient process. The discouraging part about that, though, is that that's not really a strategy at scale. You're not going to move mass people on that. But yeah, I think about this a lot of times. What I've come to learn, and this is unfortunate, is I used to go in and picture sort of a metaphor of a house, and I walk up and I go, oh, this screw is in incorrectly. And so then I take out the screw and I put a proper screw in. All right, perfect. And then it changes nothing about the structural flaws in the house. I'm like, oh, wait, what? Okay, maybe if I replace this whole wall, that would fix the problem. And what you realize is it goes down so deep, and the house is the foundation is broken. So much so that, and the debates is the equivalent, I think, of just messing around with bolts and a couple 2x4s in the house when the real problem is foundational. And they've built a whole structure of lies, a web of narratives that it takes so long to unravel that a 30-minute hit on Piers Morgan or anywhere else is not really going to give you the opportunity, especially when a lot of people are just performing, to get at that foundation. You're
so right. It's a performance for Michael Knowles. I don't think Michael Knowles is a dumb guy, but I'm using him as an example here. It's performance for Ben Shapiro. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, he's just trying to get clicks and make money. And unfortunately, Luke, you have such a huge following on social media, but I feel like on some social media platforms like X, it's not about getting it right, because getting it right would mean you'd have to wait a year, maybe an hour or two after, for example, the terrorist attack that took place in New Orleans, right? People said it was Biden's open border policies, and they were blaming it on an illegal immigrant. And that turned out not to be true. But you didn't see a lot of retractions. You didn't see a lot of, oh, I'm sorry, I got it wrong, because they're not rewarded for that. They're rewarded for clicks and how many people are reading their material, whether it's right or wrong. And Luke, I think those are the dangers of social media today, because there's so many conspiracy theories, and yet Elon Musk says we are the media now. No, you're not. But I think it's very dangerous. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And, there's even been research that looks at the speed by which a lie travels around social media versus the fact check of a lie. And you can stimulate so much more attention, because with the sort of the advantage, the twisted advantage of detaching yourself from being honest, is that you can then craft, instead of having to find facts and then deliver those to people, you can just craft a world or a story or a narrative in the way that is most engagement farming, right? Yeah. And so that then does so well on social media, which is why my ex is dead. We just don't even barely do stuff there now. But we have to constantly check ourselves, because, and my call to action to my viewers and to your listeners and viewers is, at some point, audience members have to hold accountable the content creators. If they're eating up the sort of metaphorical junk food of content always, then there's always going to be someone filling that demand. And so you have to find people that you can trust, are valuing facts over the outrage machine, and then show your support to them proactively, because the algorithms aren't just going to nicely funnel you into good, thoughtful, level-headed content. And so we're constantly trying to balance getting things, oh, X destroys X, in YouTube titling, and make sure that we're going to have to do things that perform on social media, but never sacrificing the underlying truth value of it. But that's a difficult balance, because every algorithm, because it prioritizes engagement, prioritizes outrage. And so how do you deliver? We are in an outrageous moment. And so that does produce justifiable responses that are outrageous, but, in line with facts. But how do the truth tellers compete with people who detach from that as a guardrail?
You ever think to yourself that in the middle of an interview, when you know that you're interviewing, because you interview a lot of stupid people, some smart people, but a lot of, maybe that's not the right word, but ill-informed, uneducated, use the word you want to use. And when you're talking to somebody that is just so out there, like when Joe Biden was president, oh, Joe Biden's not really the president, Barack Obama is, or Donald Trump won the 2020 election. Mm-hmm. Or when you ask them to name one policy, and you're brilliant at this, and they can't name one policy that they like under Trump. Is it hard for you not just to say, wow, you truly are an idiot, because you're such a nice guy and you're so articulate and smart, but at the same time, does that ever enter your head at all where you're like, wow, you are just an imbecile?
With people who have an audience and are figures and are well-educated and are intelligent and I know better, yes, I want to say that. And sometimes I want to do more than just say that. But people who are just your random person on the street, I do have people say this, and some people actually get on to me for it. But I do have a level of, I think because of the family I grew up in, a lot of my extended family members are in that MAGA world. And so I have a level of empathy that doesn't make me want to insult them. But what I've noticed is I think I get in a certain tunnel vision mindset in all those settings, debates too, like even the Tim Pool moment you referenced. It wasn't until after, when I watched back, where I got so infuriated that he was acting the way that he was. But same thing with doing interviews with anyone on the street or whatever it might be, is in the moment, all of my brain cells are going towards just trying to manage the conversation and hopefully steering it in the correct direction. But afterwards, when I'll watch back, the guys know who are here in the studio, that's when I start shouting about it, and I'm then using more vicious language, because contemplating what happened really can get me there. But in the moment, I'm locked in, and I don't really feel that urge.
Sure. Couple more quick questions for you, Luke, and we really do appreciate your time. So after that Tim Pool interview, I'm just curious, some of these popular right-wing podcasters, do you have any interaction with him at all? Does he shake your hand? Hey, Luke, thanks for coming in. And with some of these other popular right-wingers, do they send you private direct messages ever and call you names? Like, I'm just curious, how does that go with like a Tim Pool? After that interview, are you guys respectful to one another? Was he a jerk to you? How does that go?
No, it's just super respectful afterward, which is another part of the weirdness. And I've had huge debates with people who it's vicious in the moment. And then later they send me a DM. Hey, I really respect what you do. You're a great guy. And it's
performative.
Just, what?
Performative. You're right.
Yeah.
It's performative.
Yeah. That wasn't Tim, by the way, but other people. But he's respectful. Everyone's respectful, which makes it performative. Because if I were to really get heated in a debate, that just is my actual emotion. So I'm gonna feel uncomfortable afterwards interacting with you respectfully. So yeah, but some people, it's just a switch. They're playing a role, and that role makes the money, and that's what is a part of why our political dialogue is so broken.
Sure. So Luke, if we rewound your life 10 years ago, and we said to you 10 years ago, because you're still a young man, but 10 years ago, I'm old, I'm 44, but 10 years ago, if we said, Luke, you're going to be one of the biggest names on left-leaning media, and you're going to be a household name throughout the country, which you are. You're going to have millions of followers everywhere. What would you have said, like when you were in high school? Would you have believed that?
Well, that is a really sweet characterization. And if someone told me that, I don't know. I honestly don't know how I would have reacted. I would have been 12. So I would have been very confused.
Not long ago, but yeah.
Politics.
When was the first moment in your life where you said to yourself, gosh, I really love politics and I love interviewing people and I want to learn all the issues? Like, at what point in your young life did you decide that this is what you have a passion for and what you wanted to do?
Yeah, actually really early. So The 2016 election, I think, was when it really sparked something, which was sometime in middle school for me. And so I, since then, was obsessed, but I didn't know it was going to be a career pursuit. Actually, at the time, I was pursuing music all the way through until I was like 19, and then and I'd put my life into that. But just to kind of demonstrate how much politics consumed me, I just dropped it, and at that time was out pursuing it in Los Angeles, and moved back home. I grew up in Austin, Texas, and switched it all up and just said, I didn't even know it was going to be talking on camera or anything like that. I just knew I had to do something that would allow me for my whole career pursuit so that I could fill my entire day with it, something political. And it turned into this.
Yeah, it turned into something pretty well for you. Final political question. If you had to make a choice right now of who you'd want to be the ticket for 2028 as president and vice president, and a two-part question, and who most likely you think that they would face in the 2028 election, what would you say right now if you had to pick?
I don't like that question.
Well, I'll give you mine. Can I give you mine first? I'll give you mine.
Yeah,
first.
Go ahead.
I think Josh Shapiro, and I would pick Jasmine Crockett as his vice president. I think they would speak to women. They would speak to minorities. I think Josh Shapiro fights fire with fire, just like Jasmine Crockett. And I did want to get your take on the Gavin Newsom interview he did with Charlie Kirk, because I thought he didn't push back on that at all, and I was very disappointed. I don't have a problem. I can ask you that question another time when you come on. But when it comes to Gavin Newsom, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I don't have a problem with Gavin Newsom interviewing Charlie Kirk. I have a problem with him not pushing back on Charlie Kirk. I thought it was a puffer interview. And I have a big problem with him not pushing back on a lot of the racism and bigotry that Charlie Kirk spouts out. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'll circle back to the ticket question. I actually haven't watched the news. I've only seen some clips. There was a couple clips I saw, and I agree with you. It felt kind of, come on, I know Newsom's good at that, the rhetorical debate type setting. So it confused me that I think he was trying to keep it respectful, but Charlie Kirk was going aggressively enough where I think Newsom should have pushed back more. But again, I haven't really watched it in its entirety. Yep. So on the Republican ticket side, I just saw a report, and I've heard this now from a few different sources, that obviously Vance is going to want to run. That's obvious. But that Donald Trump Jr. really wants to get involved, and that's why Donald Trump's exactly. That's why Donald Trump Sr. kind of gave that waffly answer on if Vance is his successor, because I think he might want the dynasty. And so would that be Vance as the presidential ticket, Don Jr. as the vice presidential? As crazy as this is, I think that's what I would predict for the Republican side. Democratic side, I was also going to say Josh Shapiro, and I agree with your take on that. For vice president, I would probably want someone more established, and I like the executive role of Whitmer with her experience in Michigan. So I think a Shapiro-Whitmer ticket could be powerful. I do believe that Newsom is really good at messaging. So when people float him, I get why him as a messenger is powerful, but the fair or unfair baggage that he has, I think would really cause an issue. So we'll see. There's this California perception that's fueled by a lot of right-wing narratives that aren't true, but there is the California perception that I think a lot of voters would push back against. And then I love Buttigieg. I think it's a little too soon for him, but he'd be great as well. So they're definitely good people, but I think most likely if I had to put money on it, Shapiro at the top of the ticket. I don't know who would be vice president, but I'd like to see Whitmer.
So Luke, I agree with you with Pete Buttigieg. I think he would be a great president. Here's my problem with that. And it's not necessarily my problem. It's a problem with society. Just like partly why Hillary Clinton didn't win and Kamala Harris didn't win. And I don't think Pete Buttigieg would win, not because they're not good candidates. Hillary and Kamala are women. And I think there's a lot of bigots in this country that didn't vote for her because they're women. Pete Buttigieg happens to be gay. Now, I don't care. I know you don't care. But I feel like in this country, there are just too many, I hate to say this, but people that are bigoted in nature. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, for sure there are. I don't know if that population, what's interesting is the population that would openly say, you've seen the clips of of people saying, I won't vote for a woman, for example. There's definitely people who would say, I wouldn't vote for someone who's
Sure.
gay.
Yep.
That group, it's not like they were going to vote for a Democrat anyways, but there is a group that wouldn't believe that about themselves. But when they're asked the likability question, is this person presidential, without even knowing that the reason they think they don't get that vibe from them is because of one of those characteristics. But I do think as well that similar to that being a concern with Obama's presidency, there can be, especially when there's going to be a huge backlash to the Trump administration, I do believe electorally, it could actually surge excitement about something historic and unprecedented, as long as it's someone who first and foremost checks the merit boxes and checks the experience boxes and charisma and all those things. So it's tough. I agree that plays a role. But if the person was sort of your generational leader, you think they really could make something happen, it could overcome and even serve as a motivating factor for people wanting to overcome that characteristical bigotry.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So, Luke, before I let you go, I want to give you the opportunity, not that you need it because you have such a huge following, but if people do want to follow you, go on your YouTube page, go on all your social media platforms, maybe minus X, because I think I'm getting censored on there as well. Left-leaning, don't even get me started there with the censorship, but give out that information, how people can follow you and learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, I'll keep it pretty simple. Just Luke Beasley. If you search that on YouTube, the channel will pop up. That's where we put the most amount of our effort. That's kind of our hub. So YouTube, Luke Beasley. Then if you're someone who doesn't really watch a lot of political commentary, but you're a listener on all the podcast platforms, we publish the show there. And I'd love for you to find me there as well.
I have some listeners that just wanted me to ask one more question, if that's okay. And thanks for your time. If you were in a room alone with Donald Trump, I know you probably wouldn't want to be, but there were no cameras, there's no video, there's no audio. Luke Beasley.
Where's this going, Brian?
You're not Stormy Daniels, so don't let's not go that far. But if you were in a room with Donald Trump alone and you had the opportunity to talk to him, no cameras around, I'm just curious, Luke, what would you say to him?
I would say, can I give you a suggestion on your bronzer? It's just the wrong shade. It's all off.
That's funny, actually. I like that.
No, I think I would try to pry at, because, you've heard these reports, like when he was in the Beast with Biden before the inauguration, and behind the scenes, he'll act more normal and he'll give away his game a little bit more. So I would try to calmly question his intentions and see if he believes some of the things that he spouts off, and see if I could get privately an admission of some of the stuff I think that he's saying disingenuously.
David Pakman gave me a very similar answer to that, and I like that. I hope one day you get that opportunity. I don't know if you will. I don't know if Caroline Leavitt will invite you with a press credential. She won't invite me. But anyway, Luke, you are the best, my friend. I love what you do. Please keep up the great work. I really appreciate you coming on, and maybe down the road we can have you on again. And thanks for the time, my man. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thanks, Luke. There you go, everybody. That's Luke Beasley.